It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop. I'm Brian Sword. This week I have guitarist Al Pitrelli on the show. Now he's somebody I've wanted to talk to since the very beginning of the show, so it was a real treat to chat with him. Lots of great insight in all the bands he's been a member of, like Alice Cooper and Megadeth, but also a real good look at TSO and its huge scale. I've talked to Joel Holkster about TSO, but in terms of the guitar side, it really is Al's baby. We also talked about a few more obscure projects that I'm a big fan of, such as his work with Randy Coven and TM Stevens. So let's get right to it. Here is Al Pitrelli. So in terms of guitar, when did you pick that up and what was your early influences?
Well, that was that fateful evening, 1964, when the Beatles played Ed Sullivan.
Ah, yes.
My grandfather had an acoustic guitar sitting in the corner by the fireplace, and I guess I was 2 years old, but that did it. I mean, I just kind of watched the TV and saw the guitar and ran across the living room and kind of like started strumming it. And not too long after that, once I was able to at least pay attention, I must have been 4 or 5 years old, my mom, got me involved in, traditional guitar lessons with some guitar teacher in town, Alfred's Basic, Book One, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Guitar was bigger than me. But that was kind of how it started.
And in terms of, actually, it's really funny because it's either Kiss or the Beatles. It's always the same answer, one or the other. You can always depend on it.
Yeah, I think depending on how old you are, those were the two biggest things. I mean, obviously, the Beatles for my generation, I mean, that was it. They not only did they change me musically, they changed the world. They changed pop culture. And then you fast forward, I guess, about maybe, 13, 14 years when Kiss hit, that was just as shocking to the world. I mean, again, great songs, but, the production, the fire, the larger in life, the costumes, the makeup, the whole thing, it was like nobody had ever seen that before. I remember when I bought Hotter Than Hell, and I put it on my father's turntable, and, the first song started, my father came running in and thought, it was like some exorcism going on. He threw that record across the room and wanted nothing to do with that, which made me love them even more.
In terms of early bands, when did you start playing with other people?
Pretty soon. I mean, I got the bug pretty early. When I was, I guess, 10 years old, I moved from the house I grew up into another house, and it wasn't very far away, but we made that big move. And it must have been, I'm going to say 1972, 73. And I remember moving into this new house, and I had my bicycle and, my guitar or whatever. I had been taking lessons and, playing in like the elementary school band and orchestra and all that stuff. But the next door neighbors, I remember hearing this noise coming from their house, and I've never heard anything like it before. And it was a garage band, They were playing in their parents' garage, and they were playing In Memory of Elizabeth Reed by the Allman Brothers. And again, it was Vietnam time, so they were like hippies. They had like long hair, army jackets, American flags. Girls had on tube tops and overalls, and everybody smoking pot. And I was like, this is it. I've died and gone to heaven, And I remember running over there, and they were really sweet. They must have been 16, 17 years old at the time. And I went over, and I had my guitar, and they let me jam with them. And like from then on, I was like the annoying little kid next door, banging on the door every morning. Could I play with you? Could I play with you? And they let me play Allman Brothers and Santana. They were doing like Chicago songs back then. It was just the Stones. It was just they would teach me how to play, and I would like watch them and kind of try to like learn how to play. Okay, he did the pentatonic scale, like all the normal stuff that you start out at. But dude, I got bit by the bug. I mean, it grabbed me in the innermost part of my heart and my soul, and these guys were doing it because they were having fun. Nobody really knew that like I couldn't breathe without that,
And when you did get that obsession, were you one of those guys then that just kind of locked himself away in his room for hours and hours and hours and just was obsessed, or was it not really that way at all? No,
it was. It was an obsession. There was a lot of staying home and practicing. My dad was fortunately / unfortunately my high school principal. So that was a very stressful couple of years for the both of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so I tried to do well in school. I had no choice in the matter. But there was a great music program, back in the '70s where I grew up. So 4 or 5 of my classes during high school were music classes. They would either be, I was in the band, the choir, not the choir, I couldn't sing, but the band, the orchestra, the jazz band. They had theory classes back then. So, I was pretty much always, really involved with music, the mathematics and the mechanics of music. I was a math geek, so that really attracted me. I was playing, trumpet in the school band as well as guitar. So I learned about horn arrangements. I was reading a lot of scores, and I just didn't realize that I was getting such an important education. I just thought, well, this is kind of cool. Beats going to geometry. And then, it would go home, and I had like my high school band, and we would set up in either my mother's basement or the drummer's basement. We'd jam until dinner time, go home, do homework, kind of, or at least make believe doing homework, and then staying up all night with the turntable trying to learn the guitar solo from whatever I was learning at the time, with the needle on the record back and forth 1,000 times. So it was, I never really, had a girlfriend, anything serious, because they were like, you practice more than you talk to me. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Now get away from me. Like all the normal things that you're supposed to do when you're 15 and 16, But I couldn't get away from it, dude. And back then there must have been 50 guitar players in my high school, in my town, and every town had 50 guitar players. And you would travel if you heard somebody was really good somewhere, you'd go listen to him play in his garage band. And, it was such a competitiveness, but it was such a sense of belonging to something important, because no matter what, if you were the guitar player in the band, you were cool.
And when you finished your high school time and announced you wanted to pursue music, your father as a high school principal, how did he take that?
He never get it, dude. We fought a lot, because you're talking about an era that they didn't understand musicians. I mean, my father would, he'd stay up every so often and watch Don Kirshner's rock concert or Midnight Special with me. Those are the only two ways that you could actually see bands play, unless you went to a live show, So he would see Alice Cooper and Queen and David Bowie, and he's like, no, not going to happen. No, forget it. And, and I tried explaining to him that, well, those are rock stars, and there's other, musicians who just work. There's, I was already familiar with certain session players, Larry Carlton, Jay Graydon, all the dudes out in LA, Tommy Tedesco, these guys who would just do like playing on everybody's records, doing TV shows. I mean, I was trying to educate myself. I just wanted to play guitar. I didn't really care what I did. I just wanted to be a guitar player, not necessarily in a band. But if it was in a band, great. If it was in a studio, great. I just had to make music. I had to play guitar, and I loved the creative process. So he didn't really get it. Unfortunately, he died pretty young. He never really saw what it could have become or what it was supposed to become. We were still kind of going at each other's throats a little bit. But he saw that I loved it more than anything, so he respected me. And I told him, listen, I don't care if I'm broke all my life. I want to do this, So I taught myself to where I got good enough to at least teach and make a living after high school. I went to, a couple semesters of college, but that wasn't for me. I wanted to hit the streets. I wanted to move to New York City, and I wanted to throw a gig bag over my shoulder, and I wanted to take the world on.
And how were those early years when you took the world on then? So you're in New York, and you were teaching?
Uh-huh. I was teaching. I mean, back then, there was a little guitar store on Long Island at the time. It was called Focus 2. And then it became, I think they called it the Music Emporium. But I would teach 6 days a week, and I think I had, once I got kind of rolling, about 75 or 80 students a week.
Oh, wow.
And it was awesome, dude, because, you go in, you teach from like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. It's about 9 at night. And then at 9, I could go into the city and hit every club, or, I try to bang on every recording studio's door, and come home 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and sleep until noon. I was like, that's enough. And then, go to work again. It was kind of funny. I was such an arrogant little shit back then. Like Saturday mornings in the music store, all the kids would be off from school, and they'd come in with their parents or whatever, and they want to buy this guitar, that amp, that pedal, whatever. So I would wait until I had a couple-minute break, and I'd wait until like the store upstairs was like really crowded, and I'd plug in and play, and I'd just wail for about 5 minutes. And about 10 of the kids that were in the store was like, can we take lessons from him? And that's how I kept building up my roster. But again, back then, you're talking about maybe 82, 83, 84. This is Van Halen took the world over. He changed playing forever, in the best way ever. I mean, thank God for King Edward. The LA metal scene was kicking. Everybody wanted to be a guitar player, dude. And it was just the greatest time for young guitar players. So, I mean, I made a pretty good living, I wouldn't say I was broke. I wouldn't say I was, sitting well, but, I was paying the rent and feeding myself, and I kept gas in my car and just kept me getting back into Manhattan, back into the city. I just kept wanting to beat the streets and try to, get a job.
And what was your first opportunity then?
Well, the first real gig that I had was playing guitar for Michael Bolton. I think it was I'm going to say 85 or 86. I don't really remember. But this is when he was still, kind of more of a headbanger. Before his records exploded. He had a minor hit called Fool's Game on one record. And his second record was called Everybody's Crazy. And on that record, Bruce Kulick played guitar. I was a bit of like a geek, like reading album liner notes back then. Anyway, I bought this record and I looked at the back of the album and it said, Bruce Kulick on guitar. And I was like, he just joined Kiss. And Michael Braun played drums on the album. I knew he was playing with Hall & Oates. Skylar Deal was playing bass. He had just joined Billy Joel's band, on and on and on and on. And I said, this guy does not have a band. So on that record, at the bottom of it said managed by Lieber and Krebs Management. And I knew Lieber and Krebs was the biggest management company in the world. At the time, they were handling Aerosmith and AC/DC, Def Leppard, the Scorpions, Ted Nugent. I mean, they were kind of it, dude, And I got a couple friends together, and I said, listen, here's the idea. If we learn all these songs, maybe we'll get lucky, and they'll audition us as Michael's touring band. And they said, cool, we got nothing to do. Let's give it a shot. And that's the short story. We rehearsed for about 3 or 4 months without even the opportunity of an audition, and we hounded these poor management companies. I mean, back then you could just like either go to the office and bang on the front door and they'd let you in, and then they'd throw you out, or you can call them up. There was no telephone. You could actually get a human on the phone. So we became friends with the girl receptionist because she thought we were cute, and said, no auditions yet. And finally one day they just gave up because they were sick of hearing us, So they gave us an audition at SIR Studios on 52nd Street, Manhattan. And Michael walked in, and something was said like, I heard you know some of my songs. And we said, no, sir, we know all of your songs. And he called it. We played it note for note, and he hired us as his touring band. And I got my laminate, and I wore that to the Denny's in my neighborhood for about 2 years. Like we thought we had arrived. The tour was like 6 shows long, 5 clubs and, a really small arena somewhere opening for Katrina and the Waves or some hellishness like that. But, we were on top of the world, We just said, okay, we broke down one door, let's keep going. And from there, it kind of started. But a very important side note was the Lieber and Krebs Management, like I had said, managed all those great bands. They had this young producer that they were managing also, who was just starting to cut his teeth and make a name for himself in the city, and that was Paul O'Neill. And I met Paul back in, I guess, 85 or 86, and he goes, man, I think that's awesome how you got this gig. That shows some real, you really wanted it, and you really worked hard to make an opportunity out of nothing. He goes, we should work together one day. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'd love to. And then 10 years after that, he did call me, and, that's why you and I are talking tonight.
And so after that short tour, what moves did you make after that?
Oh, well, I immediately went to the local Porsche dealer. I thought I was going to buy a 911, looking at houses and strippers, all the normal stuff you do when you just made like $800. Wow, dude, I'm huge, Then you just try to keep it going. You figure, well, I got lucky once, who do I know? Who did I meet? And people started talking about, the guys in this band. They would say, that's the dude, Michael Bolton's band, they're touring, they're doing this, whatever. It's more, it never had anything to do with money. It always had to do with just like notoriety and the word of mouth starting to kick in. So from there, I probably countless, free demo sessions, and, the occasional, like I'd run into Joe Lanterna somewhere and he'd say, hey, come on, let's go write a song together. A couple records came in, like the dudes from Kool and the Gang hired me to work on something with them one day, and everything I thought was the next big thing. There was no internet back then. There was no YouTube back then. It was just word of mouth. If you were good, people would talk about you. And if they talked about you, you'd go to a club and you'd meet up. It was old-fashioned American networking, We went from club to club, from hotel to hotel, from party to party. Who's hanging out where? We're there, dude. Fix your hair, scrape up like a $20 bill somewhere, make believe that you could afford to drink, and
Those years then in the mid '80s, then was it mainly session playing?
it was like, playing a lot of clubs. But most of it was like, one of the things that Bolton did say, he's like, look, you play good, you got a lot of work to do. He goes, but also don't ever forget, work on your songwriting. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of, kind of finding writing partners, doing demos. This is when home studios first became a thing too. Like when the original 4 tracks came out. So all of a sudden, like you could stay home all night and write. You had a drum machine, a synthesizer that almost sounded like a pretty good piano, a Rockman, that you could plug your guitar in and you could record, and, you could like cut your teeth as a songwriter, as, a wannabe engineer. But it also taught you like, all those demos and all those sessions you were doing, you were playing to a metronome, you were playing to a drum machine, you were constantly playing and coming up with parts and thinking of things. And I was pretty well versed, bouncing back to like the front part of our conversation, all the different styles. I had studied with John Schofield back then. I was taking some lessons with him in the city, so my bebop chops were pretty good, Leslie West had become a really good friend by hanging out in the same studio, so, I would watch Leslie play and listen to, his guidance, his tutelage. So I was just putting all this together. So I could do a country, demo. I could do, a rock demo, not a straight ahead jazz thing. But, of course, I wanted to kind of try to emulate Steve Lukather a whole bunch, I mean, guys that had no musical boundaries that could kind of play anything. And all of a sudden you find yourself, doing that 5 or 6 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. And, your timing's getting pretty good. Your meter's getting pretty good, coming up with parts on the fly, doing it in 1 or 2 takes, you're getting better as a soloist. You're just getting better because you're constantly doing it. You're putting in that 10,000 hours that they say it takes to become good at something. So most of it was, I think, half playing live, which again, playing live is a whole nother animal, being able to perform, being able to play the parts. Again, back then, nobody was really recording it. So, you figure, okay, I got away with that one. I made some mistakes. But if you listen to like the board cassette afterwards, you're like, oh, God, I suck, And you keep working at it, you keep working at it, you keep working at it. You just keep trying to get better, and until one day, something else clicks. And it was just a circuitous, very long, circuitous journey that I think is still continuing to right now.
And how did the Alice Cooper gig come along?
Well, that was one of those kind of chance things from again, word of mouth and. Playing in bands and, being like the hot shot in your local town or whatever. I think it was like 81 or 82. There was this band that lived a couple towns away from me. I heard it through the grapevine, or maybe, I was going to community college. I don't remember, but I heard that they needed a guitar player. I was like, yeah, go check it out. Different bunch of people, different town. I don't know these guys. Let's go see what it's all about. I went down, great singer, great rhythm section, good songs. I played with them for a little while. They're like, you want to be in our band? I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. I said, what happened to your other guitar player? They said, he left, he went away to college. He went up to Berkeley and Boston. I'm like, all right, right on. Anyway, I didn't think too much of it. So, I don't know, 6 months later, they said, hey, our old guitar player is going to come down. We've been telling him about you. We said you're really good. He'd love to meet you. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, that guitar player turned out to be Steve Vai. Of course it did. And he walked in, and he was like just the utmost gentleman, really sweet, and a good guy, very complimentary. And we became friendly. I wouldn't say friends, but certainly friendly. And we would correspond back and forth. We'd write letters and how's it going in Boston? Great. How's it going down there? Yeah, pretty good. He goes, yeah, you should come up here, dude. It's good for you. Anyway, he went on to play with Zappa. Not too long after that, for their Alcatraz and for Alcatraz Roth. And then again, my life at that point, what we had just discussed, trying to cut my teeth and do it. And Steve was just always a good dude, Anyway, he had recommended me to replace him in David Lee Roth's band, I guess in 80, I'm going to say 82, 89. I want to say 89, 88 or 89, all right? Anyway, and Greg Bissonette called me up. He said, listen, Steve really talks highly of you, dude. Can you come out here? I'm like, dude, I'm there, no problem, And they gave me a bunch of tunes to learn. I knew most of the Van Halen stuff anyway from teaching, and I knew most of the Vai stuff because I was such a huge fan of his, and what they did on Eat 'Em and Smile was awesome, and on Skies. I love both of those records. Anyway, I went out there and I walked in and, Dave gave me a traditional David Lee Roth greeting, my heart's racing and he's being, the quintessential rock star, and it just made me feel right at home and like terrified at the same time. And, we played with the band and he goes, oh man, that was awesome. You're my guy. I'll let you know what's going on. And Greg, listen, it's a great job, dude. Dave really loved you. Cool. We'll talk soon. I'm like, whatever. Thank you. And I went home and Greg Bisson and I called up not too long after. They said, listen, Dave really loves you, but he's not really ready to do anything right now. He was going to pursue a movie. I don't know what he was going to do. He goes, but I just was out, wherever, and I ran into Alice Cooper, and he's looking for a guitar player, musical director. So I kind of recommended you, and Vi kind of backed me up and said the same thing. I said, oh, dude, thank you so much. That's awesome, And again, going back to just good old-fashioned networking and, doing a good job, being kind of a good guy, playing well, being polite and respectful. And, these guys, threw my name into Cooper's lap. Not too long after that, his manager called me up and said, are you interested in coming out? I'm like, yes, sir. Just tell me when, where, I'll be there, And they flew me out to L.A. and I, had worked up a bunch of Cooper's songs. He had that record Trash out, which was a huge, Poison was just crushing all over the place, So again, it was a very exciting time. They must have auditioned every guitar player in LA, all these great players were out there. But as much as he needed a guitar player, he needed somebody to run the band, and that's what I think helped me kind of nudge everybody out of the way, because I spoke the language so fluently and I understood how to communicate to musicians, either mathematically, talking modally or theory or whatever, or, the old-fashioned way, no, third fret. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Alice was pretty impressed with that. And I was like, look, he goes, and he just hired me on the spot. He goes, you're in, So I moved to L.A. and we dug into rehearsals for about 2 or 3 months. And next thing I know, we're on this world tour with this huge record. And it was, everything I had dreamed about, it was just like, okay, all that work. I must have been, if 89, I was like 26 or 27 then, I was like, that was a long road to get there, and I wasn't going to let go of this one. And same thing from there, that lasted about a year and a half. It went on from that band to another band to, doing this record, that record, and all of a sudden I was doing what I wanted to do, and doing a lot more sessions in New York City, getting picked up to do some tours, getting involved with a couple different bands over those, bunch of years up until 95. And it was just so much fun, it's like, wow, look at this. I'm playing guitar. I'm almost 30 and I'm still playing guitar for a living. Cool. This has been great. I figured it's going to dry up any minute because, Kurt Cobain and Nirvana and all those bands came out of Seattle, I guess around 90, 91, 92, whatever that was, and that was the end of, the guitar hero, that definition of guitar hero. But again, I was never that dude. I just wanted to be a guitar player. So, it got a little squirrely for a couple minutes, but, that's when, Paul O'Neill, 10 years after our first meeting in 85, called me up and said, I got this thing I want to work on. Can you come into the city? I'm like, yeah, dude, no worries. I'll be right there. And that's a whole nother chapter of a story.
And before we jump into that one, there's one record in particular I want to ask you about. It's a record that I absolutely loved. Sammy Says Ouch, Randy Coven. And I'm a bass player, and he was just a monstrous bass player, and I never really felt he got his due, and sadly he's passed.
Yeah.
But can you tell me about working with him and that record in particular? And I know you did another one with him, but we'll start with the first one.
Yeah, we did a couple over the years. Randy was, again, like you just said, dude, an incredibly talented bass player who just, for whatever reason, I don't know that the world after Jocko and after Billy Sheehan was ready for another one. Jocko kind of did it, and so did Billy. And Randy was definitely, of that ilk. Mm-hmm. I guess the vehicle just wasn't there for him. You know what I mean? So I don't know why he never really accomplished, what he should have, because he was so good. But, we were buds. Me, him and John O'Reilly were just friends, we were all kind of just, cutting our teeth together, again, different circles on, in the tri-state area in New York during the clubs, in the clubs during the 80s. But, Randy, his compositions were just so cool. He had such a great sense of humor, and he was just a lot of fun to work with. So when he called me up to work on some records with him, I was like, yeah, dude, I'd love to. And we went up and started recording. And it was really just that simple. There was nothing to it. It's just like, we went into Millbrook Studios. A buddy of mine, Paul Orfino, owns a studio upstate New York that's on this old farm. So you it was like a mini, I don't know, like a mini Bearsville, We lock ourselves up there for a month at a time, getting all sorts of trouble during the day and record all night. It was definitely cool and such a fun time.
And in terms of the writing sessions for that, did he come in with the songs written, or did you write them together? How did that go?
He would come in with some ideas of some songs, and then he liked to collaborate. He was kind of smart like that. He he'd have a riff, and I'd say, oh, that's cool, but we come from kind of two different backgrounds. Like he had a very unique writing style, but very musical. And I would add my parts to it. Some things he would have that were completely already done, and you just listen to it and I'm like, how did you play that? I got to play that on the guitar. Oh, tell me, and then other things we would just kind of, have maybe a little too much, Jameson's one night and write a cool riff. And next morning go, oh, that was kind of fun last night. How did it go? All kind of innocent, good old fashioned, put a band in a room and see what happens.
Now, moving on to Savatage and Trans-Siberian, they both seem to have started for your time with them around the same time. How did that all work out?
Well, Paul O'Neill had been working with John Oliva and his brother Chris for years. And it went from being kind of like a four-piece metal band to a more progressive sounding, almost orchestral sounding situation. And they started writing like rock operas, like concept records, not too different like The Who, would do Tommy Quadrophenia, Pink Floyd, Kansas, Alice Cooper, whatever it would be. All the songs were kind of being tied together with the commonality of a story that was written around this record, So Chris, unfortunately, had passed away, I think in 93, maybe 94. When they went in to do this rock opera called Dead Winter Dead, Paul had something really special in mind for the record, but he was listening to a lot of guitar players, all great players, but again, he was missing a certain element that he couldn't really put his finger on. He didn't know what it was missing, but he'd know it when he'd heard it, Anyway, so a mutual friend, this guy named Jeff Allergy, said, why don't you call Al? And Paul's like, oh my God, I haven't seen him in years. Jeff gave Paul my number. Paul called me up, chatted for a couple minutes. I was like, yeah, where are you? He said, Studio 900, which is on 19th Street and Broadway in the city. I'm like, yeah, I remember that place. I'll be there in a couple hours. And I went in and we, kind of like caught up on old times and started chit-chatting. And he put the faders on this song, Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, 1224, And I'm like, what's with this? And he told me the story behind it that, I said, that's kind of weird doing a Christmas carol, it's kind of heavy, it's kind of cool, but what's up? And he told me that it was about the war in Yugoslavia, And as he was telling me that story, the hair on my arm was standing up and he goes, what's the matter? I said, dude, I was there. I played there with Cooper in 1990, the town square that you're talking about, the bombings, all that stuff. I said, I made friends over there that were killed in that war. The soccer stadium, not too far from where you're talking about, I played and it was blown up, so we kind of looked at each other and went, oh, that's creepy. And I said, just, let me plug in, let me diddle about. And all of a sudden I came up with the opening. And then, the kind of that ostinato that runs throughout the rest of the song and some of the lines. And I kind of just went back to, that dark place that sometimes you have to draw upon as a musician, as an artist to kind of, to just summon whatever demons you need to summon to kind of put a little bit extra behind the notes. And Paul just said, that's it, dude. That's what I was looking for. And that was the beginning of what's been a 20-year, kinship. He's like a crazy big brother. I think he calls me the little brother he never wanted.
And how has the growth of that, because it's such a huge event now every year, and it's, different, touring up different sides of the coast and whatnot. How was the growth of that project? Did it hit hard right away, or was it a slow build? How did that go?
It's the weirdest thing. The only way that I could explain it, it's like watching one of my kids grow up. You don't really notice like the little changes from day to day or month to month or even year to year. But when you look back you go, oh my God, from infancy, when this thing first opened its eyes in 1995 to, when I left Paul last week in our studio in Tampa, finishing up the new record, I kind of looked over my shoulders like, look how far we've come, dude. Yeah. So, and Paul's pretty clever. He really doesn't get caught up in whatever you want to call the bigness of it or the magnitude or the scale or just how enormous it's gotten, because really nothing has changed. I mean, we write the same way, we record the same way. I mean, my piece of real estate on a stage is about the same size it's been since 1977 in some bar, It's just the stage is a lot bigger, the rooms are a lot bigger, but I kind of stand in the same spot I've always been in, John O'Reilly, who's been with me since 1985 on drums, 86 on drums, his drum riser has never gotten any bigger or smaller all these years. So every so often we'll look at each other and we'll kind of laugh. I kind of judge it like this. As it got bigger, I count more exit signs in the building, So you think about playing a bar, it's got one exit sign on the other side of the pool table. In an arena, I think the last count was like 52 exit signs. That's how you know you're doing pretty good.
As the musical climate has changed throughout the year and this thing continues to grow, I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around how you guys have managed to do that through all the changes in time. Is it because it's based on something so classic of the Christmas carols, or like how have you done that?
I think partly that. I mean, listen, you couldn't plan this. If you got all the smartest people in the world in the music business together in a room and said, what's going to be the next big thing? I don't think everybody planned anything. I don't think anybody said Guns N' Roses was going to change the world. Hendrix was going to change the world. Van Halen was going to change it. The Beatles. It could be any band that came out and just did something different that like got people's attention. I think is the secret. Whitesnake, when they came out, it was just so much different. When the Still of the Night album like hit, it was like just completely different than anything that was going on back then. When Guns N' Roses came out, it was completely different. When Nirvana came out, Soundgarden came out, everything, it was just like, wow, what's that? That sounds cool, because we got everybody's attention. When my mother put on the radio one day, whatever station she was listening to in the winter of '95, and heard the opening of Christmas Eve Sarajevo, she didn't know it was me, but she couldn't help be like drawn to it, because it was like, it's just haunting, it's beautiful, it's powerful, and it was different, and that kind of started it. So Paul taught me a long time ago, he goes, you don't chase the money, you chase the art, and everything, may or may not fall into place, but at least you have good art to leave behind, and I think a combination of he and John Oliva's, songwriting, Paul's storytelling, the way it was put together, the story that kind of linked it up, very Frank Capra-esque, but very, very modern. It was so musically deep, but it didn't go over everybody's head. It wasn't like, I loved Mahavishnu and I love Return to Forever, but like a lot of normal people, normal, non-musos, maybe they didn't get it, maybe it was just like too much for some people. Paul's got a knack for taking all those elements, but somehow just, everybody loves it. I mean, 5-year-olds, my 4-year-old Olivia, she comes to the concerts and she doesn't know what it is. She loves it, like she shakes her hair like the rest of the girls in the band, and she dances and plays air violin. My oldest son, who's 30, who's in the special forces, he loves it. My mother, my wife, I mean, everybody just, they enjoy it. There's probably 1,000 reasons, and I don't want to give any one reason more credit than the other 999, I just think that it's really good. And at the end of the day, it's honest. This is what we do. We don't try to conform to what's going on at radio. We just try to do what we want to do. And, we sold about, I guess, 11 or 12 million records and probably that many seats in arenas and theaters over the years. And every year we just try to get a little bit better, a little bit bigger, a little bit louder. And because the folks that come see us year after year, if they're bringing new people, we want to impress them. We want to say, hey, you saw us last year. This is going to be better this year. And the person you're sitting next to has never seen us before, so we want to put them on the backs of their heels for 2.5 hours, Or if you listen to our music in your car on the way there, we want you to enjoy it. There's certain things that are very recognizable, a lot of, Chopin and Beethoven themes, Tchaikovsky. There's a lot of great original music that's been written into the scores, and there's always a really beautiful story that connects them, not too different than what Andrew Lloyd Webber's done all these years. Great stories with great music.
It's funny though, because you look at it from the perspective of success, and you can pick out all these different reasons for it to be successful. But if you wipe that away and you just look at it on paper, it's terribly uncool. It shouldn't work.
It shouldn't work. Isn't that the best? And I'm so glad. Listen, there's an old story that everybody knows that the bumblebee can't fly. Aerodynamically, it's impossible for those little wings of the bumblebee to support the body size of the wing. Rocket scientists have said time and time, it just will not work. Everybody knows the bumblebee can't fly. Just don't ever tell the bumblebee that,
Dude, that's a brilliant way to put it. I love it.
Hartley Peavy told me that story about 25 years ago. The guy who owns Peavy Electronics.
Oh, yeah.
And they said that he couldn't do it. And he told me the story about the bumblebee. And I said, I'm going to steal that from you. He goes, you just use it. Just always give me credit. But it's the God's honest truth. You don't tell me we can't do it, because then we're going to work harder to do it. Nobody knew what had happened in that winter of 95 when that song hit the radio. It was the #1 requested song in America on all radio formats. It was like, okay, in 95 it happened. That was a fluke. In 96 it happened again. All right, they got lucky twice. That was 20 years ago. So we've been lucky every year. I'll take it. However people have to define it, I'll just nod and smile politely and go, absolutely, you're right. Just call me the bumblebee.
And what is on the plate for this year then? You say you have a new record coming out. I would imagine the tour you're going to start building that up soon.
Yeah, the new record we just finished last week. I kind of, put my guitar down and said, all right, we're good. And Paul said, you're done. I'll see you in Omaha in 5 weeks. So that record, I think they're releasing on or about Halloween. It's called Letters from the Labyrinth. Great collection of songs. I mean, probably some of the hardest stuff we've ever recorded. We did a couple of the songs this past summer. We did an open air festival in Germany. We debuted a couple of the songs there. They went over amazing. We'll be playing them again on this winter tour. And yeah, like you had just said, I leave on, I think, the 30th of October. And we're going to start, production rehearsals, for the winter tour. And, I think somebody told me it was 103 shows in 60 cities in 43 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
And will that be split up again with different touring bands? Is Joel Hoekstra going to be playing again?
Well, Joel's not going to be with us this year. He got hired by Whitesnake, I guess, last spring, and that tour, I guess they're doing so well that the tour keeps getting longer and longer. So Joel's, he's gone off to do that. We wish him, obviously, the best. I mean, he's a great player and a great dude. But we got this younger player named Billy Hudson that, it's funny, I was joking with Billy. We were doing, he played with us at Wacken, that open air festival I was just telling you about. And I looked at him and he was like, what? And I was like, this is like looking in a really, like a 25-year-old mirror looking at you, You got that same look in his eye that I used to have, He's hungry. He's like always practicing, always doing his homework. I mean, we had like a 6-hour layover in the airport trying to get to Hamburg a couple months back. And, he had his guitar out, at the gate, waiting for the plane. I'm like, all right, dude, that's enough. Stop. He's practicing. He's just a great guitar player. So anyway, he's going to be with us. Hopefully for a long, long time. He's just an amazing player and just a really good guy. I'm really happy that he's on board.
Now, to go back a little bit, there's another particular album that I'm sure you don't get asked about a lot that I'm a huge fan of, that I was curious about the behind the scenes of, was an album you did with T.M. Stevens, the Deep Purple tribute album, According to New York.
Absolutely. That was so much fun.
Because it was such a unique spin on everything. Like, it was not a paint by numbers tribute record. So how did that come together?
Well, I had met T.M. Stevens, oh Lord, I'm going to say around, I had seen T.M. play years and years ago. He was playing with Miles Davis for a while, and then he was playing with Joe Cocker, just like one of the most incredible bass players on the planet. I mean, dude was just absolutely awesome. I met him officially when I started working with him in 1990. TM, myself, and a drummer named Joe Franco became the house band for Cove City Sound, which was a recording studio that was run by a producer named Rick Wake. So we were doing like Celine Dion records and Taylor Dane records. Joe and I ended up doing the Widowmaker record with Dee Snider in that same studio. And TM was playing bass on all these other records with us. And we would just kind of goof around. He'd make us laugh, dude. He was just like funny as all get out. But he had the most incredible voice too. So, we would kind of get together. He taught me, really how to play funk. I mean, like just old school, South Bronx funk, And every so often, like we get together and jam. It'd be me, TM, Bernie Worrell, who was a keyboard player from Parliament Funkadelic, who invented basically like synth bass, on the move. A drummer named Will Calhoun that I had gone to college with for about a semester or two. And Will ended up, he started that band Living Color, with and Corey. So it was like that whole scene of those kind of players that had a different take on, what I call the same 12 notes. I mean, it's a finite amount of ingredients in music with an infinite amount of combinations. And these guys were just like basically taking me back to school and teaching me how to approach things even differently, sparser, different kinds of comping, different kinds of voicings. Anyway, long story short, TM was getting involved in doing a lot of these kind of tribute records. And he says, you want to work on this one with me? And it was going to be me, TM, I think Cindy Blackman, who was playing drums with Lenny Kravitz at the time. I think Richie Kotzen came in and played some guitar and a few things. A bunch of different singers. Joey Lynn came back and sang. Corey Glover came in and sang. TM sang. It was cool because it was different takes on like these like classic rock songs. But when TM puts a bass around his neck, everything changes. Dude. I mean, that the vibe and the funk and like he calls it just like stink finger. I mean, he pick up the bass and you can't help but just smile and be in a good mood. He is Shaka Zulu.
Yeah, that album is kind of a little bit forgotten, but it's just such a monster.
Yeah, it was, again, we were just like having a good time. It was a bunch of friends playing in the studio, recording live, and TM was a really good musical director. He was extremely musical. He had such an incredible depth to his vocabulary that, like if I would do something, he's like, yeah, well, no, why don't you try something more like this? And he'd push you in different directions, and that's how you get better. That's how you learn. You play with people that are better than you. And like TM and Bernie and Will and that whole bunch of people, like when I was starting to get a little kind of not complacent, but certainly comfortable and, feeling good about where I was, they would play and you go, wow, I got to get back to work. This is like deep on a whole different level because it was new, it was foreign to me. I didn't really understand that vocabulary that well, but that was the first time that I really realized that it doesn't matter stylistically what you're doing, be true to what you need to do at the time, be musically mature enough to play what the song calls for, the part calls for it. If they want you to wail, well, but if they want you to sit back and comp or think of a part that's really cool and clever to support a vocal, to support a different part of a song, well, that's what you're there to do, and sometimes it's harder, to play less, guitar players always just want to, we're attention whores, everybody. And I learned how to take a back seat, and that was a big part of my education. Get ready for what Trans-Siberian Orchestra's become, because it's not always about downstage center, playing a solo or doing something. A lot of the time, it's like sitting back and just making sure that the band, that foundation is crushing, and it gives the singers something really, really good to sink their teeth into, and we give them a real strong foundation.
I'm going to jump back to Trans-Siberian for a second. When you're working with the splinter groups, the different versions, how do you work with that band to get it up to where you want it to be?
Oh, it's like being a conductor of a good orchestra, I mean, everybody plays so well. They're all great players, and most of them have been with us for quite a while now. So they all know what's expected of them when they get to rehearsals. Everybody does their homework. We've been talking for months about the set, making sure everybody's, parts are allocated properly. You'll be responsible for this. Make sure you know this. Nobody wants to show up there and not be prepared, because it won't go well for you,
It's too big a show.
It's too big a show. It's too important. And there's no room. Rehearsal isn't when you learn the stuff. Rehearsal is when you rehearse the stuff. Everybody learns their parts at home, So, probably now I'm assuming that, Angus Clark, who plays guitar with me, John O'Reilly on drums, Johnny Lee Middleton, everybody else, everybody's probably home right now with a cup of coffee or whatever, working on their parts, listening to the songs, practicing. Getting a lot of emails back and forth about, hey, what am I doing on this tune? There's a lot of prep work that goes in. So by the time we all get into the arena in Omaha to start rehearsing, There's really no guesswork. Then it's a matter of, rehearsing the band with the production, which is a whole nother headache.
Now, do you think that the musical director gig with Alice Cooper, did that kind of set you up for this?
Without a doubt in my mind, because it taught me how to not only, rehearse a band and speak the language, again, either in musical terms or non-musical terms, but it also taught me real quick, like if something goes wrong on stage, think quick and solve the problem, because the audience doesn't need to know there's a problem. My job is to make sure, like, when everything's running smooth, it's really easy, but when something goes wrong, that's when, then that's when I become me.
Now, another band I want to ask you about quickly was Widowmaker, because it was, again, such a cool band that never really got its due. Was that a timing thing, or what do you look back at that as?
I think part of it was timing. The crazy thing about that is we sold. It's funny again how your life goes. D got a record deal. I forgot the name of the label. Okay, but it was an indie label. Again, back then nobody was signing those kind of bands from the '80s anymore. It was like 1992. So the majors were all going to the Seattle sound, whatever the heck they were doing. This one record company in New York took a shot on D, and one of the guys who was working at that label was a guy named Adam Lind. Now, Adam is also, TSO's manager now. So this goes back to '92. Adam and I first started working together. And I think, we sold about 100,000 records out of the gate, which was kind of a lot of records for a band like that with no real major label backing. And we got back into a van. I mean, it was a little difficult for D, coming off of how huge Twisted was, to kind of go back to the clubs and kind of grind it out again. But he was game for it. And if he was going to do it, we're all going to do it. But we sold quite a few records. And we were kind of on the way to building it up. We were touring not relentlessly, just we'd play anywhere. Radio was starting to pay attention to it a little bit. MTV was playing the videos like on Headbangers Ball. So it was starting to build momentum. And then, of course, the record company, something went upside down with them and they went out of business for whatever the reason. And that was it. We were left without a deal. So I don't know if maybe the label would have held its own. Excuse my dog barking in the background. But if the label would have stayed, maybe we would have gone bigger. I don't know. So maybe it was timing. Maybe it was just, that's what happened. But I know that we were doing okay for a while. And, we did a follow-up record on a different label. And it was kind of the same thing. I'm not really sure why it never clicked, but for whatever reason, I was really proud of the record. It was really a lot of fun to play with Day. We had a great time. It was a great band. We wrote some great music. But it was just the kind of thing that was like, no, and it was good for me because it kind of took me back down to, okay, at any given time, the tour buses and the fancy hotels and the arenas can go away and you're back to playing clubs, driving the van, Okay, I'm okay with this. Again, I'm still playing guitar, we're okay.
And that's a valuable lesson to learn.
Oh God, yeah. Just when you think you're sitting on top of the world, well, it can change real quick, you climb a mountain because it's there. And when you get to the top of that mountain, you look forward and there's like another 1,000 mountains in front of you. So you got to climb back down the mountain to climb up the next one. It's not ever a plateau, in this or in anything in life, it's always, it's like a good fight. Somebody goes in the ring and they're an undefeated champ until they're not undefeated. And when they get knocked down, do they lay down or do they get back up and claw their way back, And of
course, I do have to ask you about Megadeth, of which you had a couple good years in as well. How did that opportunity come?
Well, that was, again, Jimmy DeGrasso, who was the drummer in Megadeth at the time. He and I were friends for, years. We played in bands together. He was playing with those guys, I'm going to say 1999, and I guess Marty Friedman had just about had enough of whatever. But he decided it was time for him to move on. They were kind of flipped out because they were in the middle of a tour. So Jimmy said, listen, I know my buddy back home, Al, he's done it before where, if somebody had gotten sick on tour, he's walked in, fit right in. He's real pro. Why don't you get him out here until we find a permanent replacement? So I went out and I met the guys, and obviously I was a huge fan of the band. I didn't realize how intricate and intense, Mustaine's music was, until you really have to play it in the band. It's one thing to teach some kid, giving guitar lessons, the solo to whatever, or, but it's another thing to play Megadeth songs in Megadeth, and that was a little intimidating. But, I kind of filled in for Marty for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then Dave said, hey, you want to stick around for a while? I'm like, yeah, cool. I think the band needed to go to Korea, do a couple shows there. couple other things are going on. And what was going to be, 3 or 4 weeks, I think, I was in the band almost 2 years. And it was absolutely another one of the great learning experiences. That was like going to yet another different school. I mean, Mustaine's work ethic was, I think Paul O'Neill's the only other guy that I know works as much, if not more. But he was relentless. He always wanted better. He wanted more from me. He pushed me to the point where, he thought I was going to kind of like walk away and quit. And I was like, no, dude, I'm with you. I'll catch up to you. Just keep going. And he taught me to be a better rhythm guitar player. He taught me to have a better work ethic. Everything that I walked away from that band with was well worth the time spent in that band. Dave Ellison was a great friend, still is. And, again, that was just another chapter in my career that kind of led me to where I am now.
And for the recording of The World Needs a Hero, how were those sessions? And were you involved in the writing of that one again? Or was it that Dave brought in the songs and you played the solos?
I think I co-wrote 1 or 2 songs on that record with Dave. He had most of the songs written. Then there was 1 or 2 things that he said, I don't know what to do here, or I haven't thought of a part here. And I said, how about this? And he goes, that's kind of cool. Right. It was pretty simple. He's pretty open to suggestion. He had a pretty clear vision of who he is and what he wanted to do. And he knew he wanted to get the band back to being heavier, which was, I was all about that. That was fine. Everybody was, excited that Megadeth was good. The Risk album was kind of a left turn for them. I thought it was a great record. But I think he just wanted to go back and be like the heaviest, fastest, most obnoxious metal band on the planet, And you know what, dude? Nobody does it better than those guys. So that record was a lot of fun to record. It was the first time I think I'd ever worked at A&M Studios, which was thrilling. I remember, sitting behind the Steinway grand piano in Studio B one day, just kind of like tinkering around. And the engineer goes, that's the song that they wrote We Are the World on, Stevie Wonder and Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson. And I kind of went, yeah.
Wow, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So little things like that. But it was a lot of fun. Bill Kennedy was engineering that record, and he had such an incredible, he had done I think the Danzig records, and he'd work with me on the Live Cooper stuff. He had a really unique way of recording guitars, and I learned a lot from him, different amps for different tonalities. And look, dude, I believe in this one philosophy, and I try to live by it. Every day create something, or every day learn something, and playing with Megadeth, just like playing with everybody since, I was in the 3rd grade. Everything has been a great learning experience, and I've just tried to create something. If I'm not learning about it, I want to help create it,
And how much of a shock was it when Mustaine hurt his arm?
Oh, well, it was shocking. I mean, we were all worried for him. But, it was also, I was kind of in a different head back then. I mean, that was September 11th had occurred. I knew that I didn't want to really go international. We were scheduled to go to South America and all over the place. I'm like, dude, I'm not leaving the country. It's not going to happen. Nothing is this important,
Right.
Somebody just blew up my home, I had left Paul O'Neill during the infancy of TSO. We had done the first tour in 99, and it was only 7 cities. And, that really wasn't enough to keep me grounded in New York and keep me working. I needed to do more. Dave gave me an opportunity to go out and really kind of get my head on straight, from my personal life and also musically, to teach me some new things. So I was ready to walk. I don't know that he was all that happy with me towards the end, and I wasn't really happy with the situation, only because I was too concerned with what was going on back home at the time. And that's, by 2000, TSO had cut itself into, 2 touring companies because people all over America wanted shows, so they took the band and kind of took members and, the original band and just sent them off to different corners of the country. And I'd been watching, one of my children basically grow up now, and I kind of was getting homesick. And, Paul said, listen, this is your world. Whenever you want to come home, you come home. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to come home now. It's time. And, I finished the last show with Megadeth. I think it was in Phoenix or Scottsdale. We filmed the DVD, It's like, whatever the last show is, dude, I'm there. Don't worry about it. We're straight. And when we were done with that, it's like, time to go, boys. And that, right around the same time, I know, during the downtime, Dave was probably pretty pissed at me for leaving, but he had also gotten hurt. So he took a pretty long break as well. So it all kind of, works out in the end. And I mean, the music that he's been making ever since has been just crushing anyway. So, he probably doesn't remember my name right now anyway.
So, in terms of what's happening now with TSO, because you're so actively involved, it sounds like it's much bigger than like somebody like Joel or any other of the guitar players who can come in for a couple of months. How much of that time does you take, and are you working in other projects during the downtime, or is it more just enjoying your family?
Well, there are no other projects for me. I mean, like you had said, it's basically, myself and Paul O'Neill, John Oliva, Dave Whitman, our engineer. We spend most of the time in Tampa, Florida, working on the records. Now, everybody has the opportunity to come in and play. Joel came in and did a solo on a track, and Chris Caffrey came in and played. Angus Clark came in and played. We try to get everybody on the records, but I'm pretty much in there. The four of us. I got down there January 15th last year, and I just got home last week. And then we'll move out to Omaha. We'll put this tour together, and that'll take me through New Year's Eve, and then I'll come home. So the only thing that I like to do when I'm not at work is just be at home with my family, or my family come visit me down in Tampa. We're talking about actually moving the whole family down to Tampa because I don't want to be away from them, at all. And obviously, when you're touring, there's a certain amount of time that I'll be spending away from home. But Nicole's really good about it. Her and the baby come out every 2 weeks, no matter where I am. If it's in America, they'll visit. If it's overseas, they'll come out. We had a really fun time. We spent about, I think, a week and change, all over Germany and Austria this past summer after the Wacken show. So, they're real supportive, and, they enjoy it. It's exciting for them as well. So you have to find a balance. But as far as side projects go, no, dude, I don't ever want to do anything else. I mean, this is a child I helped create. I've been there since, this child opens its eyes, and now it's in young adulthood, and there's really no end in sight. You never really stop being a parent,
And at this point, it seems like this is musically your legacy.
I'd like to think so. I mean, I think it's timeless. I hope it's timeless. I hope that, my three older children, two are in the military and one's a, working bass player now. I hope that when they have kids, their children are like this. Olivia's just 4 years old now. I hope when she grows up, she'll enjoy it. When she has children, she'll like it, I know that, you look out in our audience and you see, kids 5 years old and right up to 90-year-olds enjoying it, It's the fact that they're enjoying the music is awesome. The fact that people have said that we're part of their family traditions and their holiday traditions and just things that went way past, the artist audience response or relationship, I got people coming out, 8, 10, 12 years in a row. There's one guy who's become a good friend now, Patrick Larson. I think he's seen 500 and something shows, over the years.
Wow.
I mean, there's just so I like to think that, I've helped Paul, whatever my involvement would have been, but my creative involvement, excuse me, to create something that will be around for a long time, that, maybe people will be celebrating us, around the holidays forever. I don't know. I know that the other non-holiday music that we've done, globally people are enjoying that, I know that we tour every year, it's never like, nah, we're not going to do it this year and that. Nobody wants us back this year, They're not making any more real estate in these arenas. So what do? We do 2 shows a day now, So I don't know. I don't really look at it as a legacy or a dynasty or it's like, Bill Belichick with the New England Patriots, he doesn't worry about what they did last year. He's worried about what they're doing next week, So I look back over the last 20 years going, well, that's been a great run. But the rear view mirror in your car is a lot smaller than the windshield for a reason. Don't spend so much time looking behind you. Pay attention to what's in front of you, otherwise you crash.
And as we finish this up, I think I'm going to end it with a bit more of an observation than a question. But from chatting with you, it really seems like you still look at yourself like a student of music, that you're always looking for new ways to learn. And that's just really inspiring.
Well, thank you for saying that. And that's the God's honest truth because, I don't know that, I don't know, dude. It's such a bizarre art form. There is no end in sight. It's limitless, the possibilities, and anytime that I just I'm feeling like, I don't know if what am I going to do today? I'll go put on Jeff Beck's latest record, and I'll go, oh, that's why I have so much work to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not the amount of notes, everybody wants to play faster and cleaner and more technical, and that's a matter of, fretboard gymnastics and playing your scales and your modes and your arpeggios and putting the metronome on and, banging out 16th notes at 240 BPM. That's all cool. But, you listen to Jeff Beck and he'll play one note. I'm going to spend 20 more years just trying to figure that out. Why did it sound like that? Why did he play that note there? That's the challenge. There's a guy, I'm a big fan of fighting. And there's a guy named Dan Inosanto, based out of the LA area, who's, hailed as the greatest martial artist of all time. He was, like Bruce Lee's buddy back in the day, and he did a bunch of the films with them. But, somebody told me once, he goes, if Dan's not fighting, he's talking about fighting. If he's not talking about fighting, he's reading about fighting. He's thinking about fighting. He's, this man's 78 years old, and he can kill you with his pinky, There's another guy, the Gracie, I forgot his first name, but the guy who invented basic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, he died at 90-something years old. He was still competing, he was still fighting, he was still learning, that's the best part of that. There is no end in sight. There's no end to like knowledge or gaining knowledge. There's no end to what you can learn. The best part about today is I have no idea how it's going to end. I just know that I want to learn a little bit more about this guitar that's been so good to me all these years,
That was Al Pitrelli. I hope you guys dug it. This year's TSO dates are up and tickets go on sale September 18th. That's it for this week. Remember, you can follow the show at thedoubletop.com. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter and very easy to find there. Until next week, I'm Brian Sword. Thanks for listening.